Thank you, Ginger. Well, good afternoon. I am Angie Snyder, and I'm the Executive Director of Opus Peace. And I've been a hospice nurse for more than 20 years. It's my honor and privilege to welcome each one of you today to our annual public service event. February 2nd is also known as Groundhog's Day, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that during the webinar. Also this year, the first Friday of February is National Go Red for Women Day. So it also falls on today, February 2nd. Now, this day has been designated as a day of wearing red to bring awareness about heart disease in women. And as I reflected on the meaning of Go Red for Women, I immediately connected to the similarities with the mission of Opus Peace and the reason that we've designated February 2nd for our annual public service event. Opus Peace is also a movement, a grassroots movement founded by 5 VA hospice nurses. And today is a day to honor their work, the 30 years at the VA and the 10 years as a nonprofit. And just like Go Red for Women, all of us have joined together today on this call. We are here to band together to bring awareness of the need for a pause from our hectic, chaotic, and hurried life to just get real with ourselves. At Opus Peace, we say peace begins in me. But we live in a world that is so hectic that we rarely take time to find peace for ourselves. Today is a time to learn the secret to the self-compassioning process so that you can begin to unburden yourself. The education and the tools that we'll be providing today will help you to learn how to heal the relationship that you have with yourself. And my hope for each of you is that you will use the next hour and 15 minutes for you. Turn away from the outside world and truly give yourself the gift of self-compassion. So a few housekeeping items before we get started. So today's program does include continuing education credits for nurses, social workers, and counselors. You must attend the entire program and be signed in. So for those of you watching in a group, I will need you to email me your name and email addresses. My email is angie@opuspeace.org. After today's program, you'll receive an email from the Opus Peace Administrative Assistant, Hannah Anderson, which will give you both the test and the evaluations that will be needed to complete, that need to be completed within 14 days of the program. After completion of that exam and the evaluation, you will then get your certificate. We also will make time today to take questions and answers. I know for some of you, the chat is not working, so please use the Q&A button to put any questions that you have throughout the program. We will take questions at the end, but feel free to go ahead and put that in the chat. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Deborah Grassman. She is a hospice nurse practitioner who has cared for more than 10,000 dying veterans over her 30-year career at the VA. Deborah has written 2 books, Peace at Last and The Hero Within, and has published more than 25 articles. She has 4 documentary films and a TED Talk featuring her work. As the founder of Opus Peace, we are so fortunate for the experience and knowledge that she brings to us today. Deborah?
Well, thank you, Angie. You know, National Anchor Your Heart Day. I mean, wow. I get excited just anticipating people all around the globe joining together to create a collective stillness, a commodity that's so rare and precious in today's rushed society. And I'm also excited about this hour that we have together before we gather together to create that collective reservoir of peace. We're going to talk about a pathway to personal peace that we at Opus Peace call self-compassioning, so that we can discover the brave place inside our heart that brings strength and vitality, and yes, peace. You know, does peace sometimes seem to elude you? Do hardships sometimes turn into burdens? In this program, we are going to talk about an unburdening process that will help you become fully present to yourself so that you can cultivate personal peace. We'll talk about how that fits in with soul injury and the parts of self that are holding unmourned loss and hurt, unforgiven guilt and shame, and fear of helplessness and loss of control. And mostly, we're going to talk about extending love, tenderness, and grace to those parts of self. That's the next step in helping us with that part of self that's holding the hurt, the guilt, the shame, or helplessness. And I call this self-compassioning. Now, we've all heard the expression peace begins with me, but what does inner peace really mean? Most importantly, how do you attain it? Opus Peace is a nonprofit organization that was founded by 5 VA hospice nurses who took care of more than 10,000 dying veterans. And the lessons we learned reveal a process for attaining personal peace. And ironically, those lessons came from people who had been trained for war. And the burdens these veterans carried often surfaced at the end of life. Now, some of the burdens related to their military service. And many of their burdens were burdens just like you and I carry. Now, whether it was military related or not, the burdens almost always fell into one of 3 categories: unmourned loss and hurt, unforgiven guilt and shame, and fear of helplessness and loss of control. Peel back the layers of almost any burden, and you'll find that it is related to a loss that has not been released, and so the sting still lingers, hurting the body, the mind, or the soul on some level. You'll also find unforgiven guilt over things you did or didn't do, or shame about who you think you should or shouldn't be. And there is nothing like helplessness to make us feel small and out of control. These 3 burdens can weigh us down and cause hardships to turn into burdens. Now, these 3 barriers are emotional log jams that prevent access to our real self. You know, the famous author and psychiatrist Milton Erickson put it like this: once the log jam is opened, the river flows again. You see, it's not about putting more water in the river. It's not about trying to make the river run faster or more forcefully. It's about removing the log jams so you can access the grace of your being. Because we all have everything we need in order to be whole. It's already there. It's about removing the log jams preventing access to that wholeness. And that is what the self-compassioning process is that we're going to talk about today. Now, the self-compassioning process helps people move from numbing their pain to mourning their pain, to move from hiding their guilt to using their guilt to learn how to forgive themselves and others. And instead of being ashamed of not being good enough, they learn how to release their fear of who they are and who they are not. And not only that, they move from controlling things they have no control over to letting themselves feel their helplessness and their loss of control when they're in uncontrollable situations. Now, when the founders used this process with dying veterans, the veterans would sometimes say to us, why did I have to be dying in order to learn how to do this? And of course, the answer is you don't. The self-compassioning process can be learned at any time in your life. And it's especially useful when you feel lost or disconnected from yourself, because that's called a soul injury. A soul injury is a wound that separates you from your real self. And your real self includes the totality of who you are: the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. Your real self not only includes the best version of yourself, it also includes the worst version and everything in between. It includes the facades that you hide behind and your unconscious shadow, where you stuff all the things that you don't want to deal with. And reconnecting with all of these scattered pieces of self involves a self-compassioning process. You know, in a world where you can be anything, we encourage you to be your real self, to be the real you.
Now, you notice that Opus Peace uses the word self-compassioning instead of the conventional term self-compassion. And that's because we want to emphasize that self-compassion is not so much a thing, a noun, as it is a verb, something you do, a process. Our hope is that by using the word self-compassioning, you will be reminded that exerting self-compassion is a dynamic action that requires continual conscious choice on your part. You may be very good at compassioning others. The question is, do you know how to extend the compassioning process to yourself? Do you know how to abide with your own emotional pain? Another interesting aspect of the word compassion is its word derivation. The prefix com means with, and passion comes from the Latin word pati, which means to suffer. So compassion denotes being with suffering, to abide with emotional pain.
Now, at Opus Peace, we identify the self-compassioning process with 3 steps. Abiding with the part of ourself holding feelings, especially emotional pain. Reckoning with behavioral changes that you're ready and willing to make. And beholding a deeper sense of wholeness and inner peace. So let's look at each of these steps individually, starting with the term abide. The term abide, as Opus Peace uses it, means to show up open-heartedly to all of the emotional dimensions of self. Again, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, all of it. It's being willing to bear witness to the full spectrum of who we are and who we are not, even the parts of ourself we prefer to avoid or hide. Abiding allows us to encounter ourselves, to experience the part of self that is generating the emotion in the first place. You see, it's not enough to just ventilate feelings. Now, that may feel good in the moment, but becoming fully present to the part of self that's generating the feeling is what can help you extend self-compassion. Now, there's a famous saying that says that we teach what we most need to learn. And that's certainly true for me. And with my emphasis on connecting with the part of self that's generating the emotional pain and other feelings, you might be surprised to learn that for the first half of my life, I pretty much stayed disconnected from that part of myself. And I came by this in a very understandable way. You see, my older sister was very emotional, and my parents were often upset, not knowing how to handle her feelings. I, on the other hand, didn't want to upset my parents. So rather than letting myself feel anger or emotional pain, I either pretended that I didn't have a problem or I minimized problems, saying, "That's no big deal." I created a calm, cool, smiling veneer. And I received a lot of positive attention from my parents for the stoic wall that I hid behind. "Nothing ever bothers Debbie," I was told. It wasn't until I was 35 years old and I was dealing with a painful situation that I suddenly woke up. I thought, what if my fear of feeling my pain is worse than if I just let myself feel it? And that's the day when my unfreezing began. And I discovered that tears were my friends. They weren't the enemy that I had imagined them to be. And to my surprise, when I stopped being afraid of who I was and who I was not, joy gradually emerged from the shadows of my real self.
Opening up to our real self means we have to learn how to develop a different relationship with the part of ourself that is carrying our pain so that we can become fully present to ourselves. Because when pain shows up, most of us don't say, "Oh, welcome, I'm so glad to see you." No, what we say is, "Go away, I don't like you, I'm afraid of you." And then we numb out that part of ourself. Instead, we want to say to ourselves, "Tell me how you are hurting. I will listen." Isn't that what you want from others? The question is, do you know how to do that with yourself? Or do you use numbing agents to not feel your hurt? On your screen is a small list of numbing agents that we use that keep us disconnected from the part of ourself that is carrying our emotional pain. You know, as a hospice nurse, I can tell you that regrets often surface at the end of life. On their deathbeds, what do these regrets usually surround? It's the misuse of numbing agents. Individuals see how their numbing agents separated them from the people that they loved and even separated them from their own sense of self. Now, you may not be dying, but it's important that you know what numbing agents you use that bring awareness to the ways that you are keeping yourself unconscious.
So to help people identify the feelings that they're trying to numb out, I created a 6-foot poster of an iceberg with views above and below the waterline, and it hung on the door of my office. You know, the meaning of the phrase, the tip of the iceberg, is readily apparent as this massive ice structure beneath the ocean surface is viewed in proportion to the tiny tip. Now, printed words that express various feelings hang beside the poster. And the words can be then Velcroed onto the iceberg with the invitation to match words with the feelings reflecting what's showing above and beneath the surface. So disparities between outer appearance and inner reality becomes visually apparent. Now, Clara was a patient who came to see me because she was struggling with the psychological effects of breast cancer. She told me that her family didn't want to hear anything except that her health was improving and her church community was no better. They made her feel as if she had no faith if she voiced any feelings of fear or anger or emotional pain. And as Clara spoke, her voice was dull and lifeless. She readily agreed that her lifelessness was because no one around her would let her be real. And as a result, she had acquired a soul injury. Well, I showed her the iceberg poster and I said, pick words that describe what you're really feeling and place them on the ice under the water. Well, Clara readily did so, evaluating each feeling word very carefully before she selected it. Then I told her to pick one of those feelings and bring it up to the surface, placing it above the waterline. Well, Clara picked the word anger. So then I said, well, close your eyes, anchor your heart, and let yourself get real with your anger. Well, after she did that, I made more inquiries about her anger. What does anger feel like? What does it look like? What color is it? What sensations does it create in your body? And when she was done, I asked her to pick another word. And each feeling word that she picked connected her to the part of herself that was generating the feeling. And you know, by the time she finished, there were more feelings above the waterline than there were Velcroed spots to hold them. And then laughingly, Clara said, I need to come back to this iceberg every week so I can see what I am feeling. You know, there was a lilt in her voice that reflected the vitality that had surfaced. And then she said that now she understood what I meant when I said, let pain and peace sit side by side together without fear. You know, as Clara left my office, I marveled at the power of becoming real. Becoming real has enough energy to melt icebergs. Now, Clara was not the only patient who demonstrated the power of the self-compassioning process to become real. Another veteran, his name was Tommy Bills, completely changed my perspective after I read his post-war diary so that I could glimpse firsthand the pain that veterans experience and in their journey after war so that pain and peace could coexist without fear. I'm going to show you a video that depicts that journey into becoming real. It takes my experience with Tommy Bill's diary and sets it to music and to image.
Last night I saw that movie, the one about the wooden boy. The good news is he could feel no sadness. The bad news is he could feel no joy. And it hit me hard, a puppet on a shelf. So when he wished on a far-off star, you know, I made that same wish for myself. I want to be real, real. Drop the act, take off the mask and feel real. Well, I've been going through the motions, pulled by invisible strings, and I've pushed down the hurt, and I've held back the tears, and covered up the dreams. But beneath it all, trying hard to breathe, the me I buried long ago is screaming to break free. I wanna be real, real. Drop the act, take off the mask and feel real. I wanna be real. Let the fear go, let the heart show, let the world see me. I wanna be real. Oh, and goodbye, wooden heart, and goodbye, painted smile. I wanna dance in a crowd, I wanna laugh out loud, I wanna act like a fool, I wanna be uncool, I wanna cry when I hurt, I wanna sweat when I work, I want help when I fall, I wanna feel it all. I wanna be real. Take off the mask, be real. Let my heart show real. I wanna be real.
So I want to give you a bit of a backstory about the music that you just heard from Nashville artist Karen Taylor Good. I asked Karen how the I Want to Be Real song came to be written, and I was fascinated by her answer. Karen said she always dreamed of performing on stage and singing her songs on the radio, and she became very successful, even nominated for an Academy of Country Music Award. However, she never achieved the acclaim she had hoped for. And it started dawning on her that she wanted to stop performing. She said, I want to stop pretending. Why can't I just be me? Can't I just be real? She said her realization coincided with taking her 12-year-old daughter to see the movie Pinocchio. Karen said, I thought it was some sweet little movie about a wooden boy, but I was shocked when I saw myself as that puppet on the string trying to become real. She told me that the lyrics to I Want to Be Real were written the very next day. And that line, I want to feel it all, that pretty much sums up abiding, the first step in the self-compassioning process. All right, well, let's look at step 2 now, reckoning.
While abiding is a heart process, reckoning is a head process. The term reckoning is used to convey a getting to the bottom line. No fluff, no trying to put a spin on something. We even use the term day of reckoning to convey the time that comes when coping with distress by using spins and cover-ups no longer work and the truth finally comes out. Reckoning implies that a change is coming. The future is going to be different. Reckoning means you are ready and willing to change your relationship to a hardship by cultivating the honesty, courage, and humility to face the part of self experiencing the distress. Reckoning is different than coping. Coping uses numbing agents to keep things boxed up, contained, and managed so that things can stay the same. Coping often involves not thinking about it to try to avoid any change. Reckoning is different. Instead of trying to keep things boxed up, contained, and the same, reckoning means getting to the bottom line, which requires that we open things up. It's a deeper process that sometimes stirs things up. It might involve a struggle. I liken it to gardening. Gardening includes weed control, and there are lots of ways to control weeds. You can simply cut the tops off the weeds and the garden looks great for a while. Or you can pull the weeds out by the roots. Coping cuts the tops off of the weeds, whereas reckoning pulls the weeds out by the roots, getting to the source of what's causing the weeds to grow in the first place. Coping often provides instant gratification. Reckoning, on the other hand, requires a bit of a delayed gratification. And during that delay, there's some uncertainty. There's some vulnerability while the growth is occurring. And of course, there is a temptation to revert to previous coping habits. And that's where the Opus Peace self-help tools can be helpful. This is a book written by women who served in the Vietnam War. They suffered trauma and used poetry and the arts to access their soul so that their losses could be mourned, released, and integrated within themselves, rather than compartmentalized. I want to read one poem to you. It's entitled At Peace by Lily Adams. Now I feel at peace with myself. All the anger has left. It was the sediment at the bottom of the bottle that I couldn't reach. But I finally got it out. You see, she had coped with her painful feelings by drowning them. But at some point, she put down the bottle and reckoned with the sediment causing her to drink in the first place. This is the self-compassioning journey where she first let herself abide with her hurt, let herself feel it instead of numbing it. She also gave her pain voice instead of silencing that part of self with alcohol. She made a decision to reckon with the hurt by gently and courageously opening up to the part of self that had been holding the pain for her. The result of abiding and reckoning is that you stop numbing the pain and instead let yourself feel it. You stop being afraid of your pain. You tell your ego to stop covering your pain up with anger, fear, and shame. You talk to the part of yourself carrying the pain. You comfort that part of yourself and not with numbing agents. And you tell a trusted other about your pain. So that is steps 1 and 2. Let's look at step 3, beholding.
You know, it takes a lot of energy to numb out your real self. Your vitality gets trapped when you're shut down. and you exile that part of self into unconsciousness. And waking up to yourself, on the other hand, releases that energy. And people often verbalize their experience of that release by saying something like, a weight has lifted off my shoulders. You see, that's an unburdening process that allows you to behold your real self. Now, working in hospice, I've been a privileged witness to beholding moments on a daily basis. I've witnessed people abiding and reckoning with life and death issues. And I witnessed them beholding the results of their efforts. You know, beholding moments often occur when illusions about never going to die are penetrated. And yet, peace prevails as death is accepted. Beholding moments occur when a person's bitterness and blame are transformed into peace as broken relationships converge and forgiveness is sought, and sometimes even received. Moments worth beholding are often simple moments. A tear escapes from behind a stoic wall. An unspoken fear is verbalized, a guilt released, an orphaned feeling reowned and welcomed home. These kinds of moments of insight when suffering is redeemed with wisdom is inspiring. They are experiential moments when I feel filled with awe, connected to the mystery of the universe. Captivating moments when I sometimes forget to even breathe. Moments when I feel connected to the grace of my soul and the patient's soul, and somehow the soul of the universe.
So now you have an overview of the 3 steps in the self-compassioning process. And this photo summarizes it well, because the rainbow isn't all neat and clean and bright and beautiful. It has some dark in it. It has some messy in it. Our hands get messy abiding with the rainbow of our life. And it takes some work, some struggle to reckon with who we are and who we are not, so that we can behold our real self. We have an Opus Peace ambassador here today who is going to tell you how she applied the process. I want to introduce you to Louise Sutherland Hoyt. She is a trauma counselor, and she says that learning how to abide, reckon, and behold her real self helped her, quote unquote, become. Louise?
Soul injury lessons have taught me how to unbecome the parts of myself that were not aligned with the truth of my story. As a young adult, I worked hard to become a biography that would impress people. I graduated from college on the dean's list. I had a husband who held a prestigious job with a top corporation. I gave birth to 2 beautiful daughters. I ran 10K races to stay fit. While achieving these things, I kept a smile on my face that was buttressed by a can-do attitude. My smile and my enthusiasm, however, was a veneer that insidiously covered up more and more of me. The veneer covered up feelings of not being good enough, not being lovable, and feeling like something was wrong with me. I learned to expect rejection. I flip-flopped from overly trusting relationships to under-trusting relationships. I learned not to cry and to act happy. I had a pervasive sense of over-responsibility that was driven by guilt and shame. Acquiring a soul injury by losing my real self started when I was young. At age 13, I sustained a life-threatening brain injury from a fall from my horse. I was in a coma for 4 days. Once home from the hospital, I was left alone because both my parents had to work. During that time, I used food for relief. My mother would get furious at how much she was paying for groceries. That summer, I gained 20 pounds. And that is when the fat shaming and the name calling started with my family and later with my classmates and even my teachers. Go along to get along became my motto. I did well in art. I took up guitar and I sang in talent shows. I became a cheerleader. But on the inside, I was dying. Numbing instead of abiding began when I started using alcohol to numb my feelings of hurt and shame. When I graduated from high school, I joined the Army and I became an air traffic controller certified by the FAA. I went from being mediocre to high achieving, but on the inside, again, I was crumbling. I was difficult to get along with in the barracks. I was drinking heavily. I experienced military sexual trauma, which deepened my woundedness. My drinking turned into an addiction that caused me to lose all my previous achievements until I finally decided to get help with my anxiety, my trauma, and depression. But the one thing no one paid any attention to was how to abide with all my unmourned losses. Therefore, my overachieving, numbing behaviors continued. I completed a master's degree. I threw myself full bore into a career of helping traumatized teenagers. I was elected president of the Florida Mental Health Counselors Association. I became chairman of the Government Relations Committee. Work, study, and productivity didn't get me into the trouble that my drinking had. Nevertheless, they still served as numbing agents that insidiously robbed me of my greatest loss, the loss of me. So a random, maybe not so random internet search turned everything around. I discovered the Opus Peace website. Soul injury, becoming separated from my real self. Oh, wow. This was me. Soul injury described me. I had never, ever encountered a concept that was so relevant and yet so ignored. I signed right up right then and there to take the 4-day training. I completed the loss chart, coming face to face with the lifetime of losses I had sustained. Time, space, and tears allowed me to abide with the parts of myself that had been silently holding my hurt for decades. I couldn't believe what I had discovered. I discovered a brave stranger right inside of me, whom I now recognized as such a vital part of me. I didn't need to be ashamed of her. I needed to embrace her. that would require a change in our relationship, which I learned how to do with the reckoning process. Reckoning with my newfound brave friend who had been carrying my hurt began with the simple act of letter writing. Little Louise wrote me about how angry and hurt she was for our parents' cruelty, abuse, and neglect. She told me how this had left her feeling empty, guilty, and ashamed. My adult self wrote a letter right back to little Louise and apologized for what she had been through. And I committed to working toward keeping her safe and protected in the future. Beholden, wow, did I ever? I learned how to unbecome my betrayal, my shame, and my unworthiness. And that becoming energy has allowed me to uncover me.
So let's just take a moment to anchor our hearts and to breathe deeply and become mindful of how Louise's story of a chaotic childhood, alcoholism, and overachieving numbing behaviors might touch your own story. Just taking a moment to acknowledge that. And also be aware of the brave place inside Louise who stands before you today to tell you her story. And be aware of that brave space that is also inside you. And bring that brave space with you as we move on with our program, while staying fully present to ourselves.
Now, we have very intentionally scheduled Anchor Your Heart Day on February 2nd, because today is Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day is an American and Canadian tradition that derives from a notion that if a groundhog emerges from its burrow on February 2nd and sees its shadow, it will retreat into its den and winter will go on for 6 more weeks. You may also be familiar with the movie Groundhog Day, in which Bill Murray, a self-centered weatherman, keeps reliving the same day, February 2nd, over and over again, until he gets the lesson of opening up to his shadow instead of hiding it. Now, it was the famous psychiatrist Carl Jung who coined this idea of the shadow self. We all have a shadow self. The shadow self is filled with disowned parts of ourselves, parts we don't like, parts we don't want to look at. The result is that these parts of self get buried alive in the unconscious. Now, here's the tricky part. Because our shadow is unconscious, we don't even know what we've hidden in there. Some people hide their dark side. Some people hide their light. And people who hide their light fear not being good enough or smart enough or good looking enough. Feeling less than is often how a soul injury is acquired. On the other hand, if we fear our dark side, that can also lead to a soul injury, because we all have faults and flaws that separate us from our real self. And if we remain blind to those faults and flaws, then we don't develop insight and humility. We remain unconscious and fear who we are and who we are not.
So the paradoxical question is this: why do we all run so fast from the very things that will free us up? I mean, think about it. Why are we so scared of our shadow? Again, the reality is we all have both, whether we like it or not. We all have shades of light and dark in our shadow. And both light and dark go with us wherever we go. And if we want to be real, we have to open up to the full spectrum of who we are. Now, one of our Opus Peace ambassadors, Ralph Osman, is on video telling you how he used the self-compassioning process to change his relationship to his shadow self. He was going to tell you this live today. He is online, but he has laryngitis, so we've got.
So at a young age, I made a decision to conform to the regimen on the outside, but keep my true feelings to myself. I created a secret identity. I was Ralphie to my parents, but I became Raoul to myself. Here's a picture of me in the 2nd grade. This is Ralphie. This is a picture of me in the 4th grade. This is Raoul. Ralphie lived a boring life. Raoul lived an exciting life. While Ralphie was playing with his bat and ball, Raoul was hitting a grand slam in the bottom of the 9th for the team win. Having this secret identity seemed so innocent until the day when Ralphie was out on his paper route and Raoul noticed the above-ground fuel tank for the county road equipment and started playing with the hose, fueling up his high-powered race car. Who knew that when Raoul accidentally locked the nozzle, fuel would spill all over the ground and drain the tank? Ralphie panicked and ran away. What I haven't told you yet is that Ralphie's dad owned the local gas station and had just filled up the tank that day. Imagine his surprise when he received a phone call telling about a vandal that had drained his fuel tank. It didn't take long to find the culprit. It took me all summer mowing grass, plus my paper route to pay for Raoul's escapade. Still, Raoul was my constant companion, and of course created more mischief. After one incident, I remember my dad saying to me, "You never say you're sorry." And I remembered thinking, why should I say I'm sorry? I paid it back. I got the spanking. Everything's even Steven. Well, I continued hiding my true feelings through college, through my time in the Navy, and on into adult life. By this time, I had been hiding myself for so long, I had hid myself from me. I had developed a soul injury. I became whoever I thought someone wanted me to be. And as a result, all of my relationships ended in disaster. My fortune changed when I met my wife because she loved me for something she saw in me that I could not see myself. However, it has been through the work of Opus Peace, specifically the lessons of forgiveness, that I have been able to cultivate the characteristics of honesty, to get real with myself, to summon the courage to say I was wrong, and the humility to ask for and receive forgiveness. Let me tell you how I did this. As I was preparing for this presentation, I became aware of all the excuses Ralphie used to hide Raoul. Excuses like, boys will be boys, and it had all happened so very long ago. Not to mention that I had become a really good son most of my adult life. But I realized that somewhere in the recesses of my soul, these childhood pranks lingered, and it was time I took responsibility. So the next time I visited my 98-year-old mother in her nursing home, I told her I was wrong to have committed the mischief that I did. I asked her to forgive Raoul for the turmoil he had put her through. She forgave Raoul easily enough, smiling and saying, "We all make mistakes." I felt that liberating shift that Deborah talks about that dying veterans experience when they do their forgiveness work in hospice. Tears even came to my eyes, and that's when I realized that those tears were the river flowing from the log jam I had just removed as Ralphie and Raoul acknowledged each other without fear, so we could be at peace with each other together. That day, I owned Raoul as part of me. I didn't need to be ashamed of him or make excuses for him. I just needed to help him take responsibility when he was guilty of doing bad things.
Thank you, Ralph Raul Osman. So again, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and take a moment to anchor your heart. Now take 3 deep breaths as you connect with however Ralph's story may have touched your own story. Just taking a moment to acknowledge that. Also, be aware of the brave place inside Ralph that stands before you today to tell you his story. Be aware of that brave space that is also inside you. And bring that brave space with you as we move on. Now, this webinar was an introduction to the self-compassioning process. The self-compassioning process gives you an experience of yourself. However, you don't want to be real in untrustworthy environments. That's when facades are not only important, they are essential to shield you in toxic environments. The key is bringing consciousness to your facade when you use it to protect your real self. That is very different than unconsciously believing that the facade is the real you. When you think the facade is the real you, then you create a soul injury and start living a counterfeit life. We are going to close this section of this public service event with the Opus Peace vision. And we have 3 of our founders with us today to envision the day that we can all learn how to integrate the pieces of ourselves, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, instead of compartmentalizing them or hiding them in our shadow. And if you'd like, consider saying these 3 statements out loud with them.
Cultivate in me the willingness to re-own, rehome, and revitalize scattered pieces of myself so wholeness can be restored.
Grow in me the honesty, courage, and humility to release my fear of who I am and who I am not.
Fuel me with your grace. You know, as an organization, Opus Peace uses these 3 principles as a map for our personal and professional growth. And we hope you will consider using it as well to heal the relationship that you have with yourself.
Now we're going to take questions off the chat line or the Q&A in just a moment, but there's a few things that I want you to be aware of before we gather together for the Anchor Your Heart event at 3 o'clock. We have an Anchor Your Heart card that you can download to use and also give to others. We also have a tool that all of you can download to remind you of the Abide, Reckon, Behold process. It summarizes the process that we described today and will help you implement these processes in your everyday life. This was just an introduction to self-compassioning. Many of you are going to want to purchase the full course on our Masterpiece online educational system. You can scan the QR code on your screen to access the course or go on our website. The self-compassioning course provides you with an in-depth perspective of the process. The course includes videos, articles, audiobook chapters, self-awareness exercises, slideshows, and best of all, a workbook. And the workbook with its self-help tools is the most important because that's what will transform this material from mere concepts in your head to lived experience. I'll be sending an email out in the next day or 2 with follow-up materials, and there will be links to access the course and all of the CE information that you will need. We also have an 11-minute Anchor Your Heart video that you can use to share with others, plus a discussion guide to help you provide meaningful in-services. You're going to get a 14-minute video on self-compassioning that you can use, plus a discussion guide about self-compassioning to help others. And today's webinar recording will also be available to you. Our online learning system is a great resource for individuals who want to do self-directed learning. We currently have 12 courses and 16 tools available for purchase. And new this year, we have a monthly subscription. The monthly subscription is a great way to take a course within a community where you can share your learning experience. The first lesson of every Masterpiece course is free, and we hope that you'll log on and explore the site. I will be sending the link to the site with the follow-up email. Also, Opus Peace has been offering a 4-day Soul Injury Institute for the past 8 years as a way to give individuals an experience of themselves as they learn the soul injury concepts, practice our self-help tools, and participate in several ceremonies. At the completion of the 4-day training, participants are equipped with a jump drive that contains 16 plug-and-play mini in-services, along with worksheets to help them facilitate in-services. This is a great way for you to be able to take the training back to your friends, family, colleagues, and community as a return on your investment for the 4-day training. Today, we are offering a significant discount for anyone who wants to join us for the April training being held from the 22nd to the 25th. The regular cost is $875, and the discount will be available until February 16th with a cost of $500. You can register on the website or contact me for more details. Also, recently, Opus Peace released the Dare to Forgive film. This is a 2-part film. Part 1 has the concepts and the tools for forgiveness, and Part 2, a series of short film clips. That can also be found on our website. And you heard us mention Deborah's books. They can also be purchased on our website, and book 3 will be coming out later this year. Also, if you enjoyed today's presentation and want to bring a speaker virtually or face-to-face, please contact me at my email, angie@opuspeace.org. And as you know, a public service event like this is not possible without a team of hardworking volunteers. For the past 7 months, these people have devoted themselves to bringing you this program. So thank you, thank you, thank you to our team who you see pictured on your screen. This event is also not possible without financial support, so we want to express our gratitude to our sponsors. First, our 4 Hearts sponsors, Stowe Good. So Karen Taylor Good and Stowe Daly are longtime supporters of Opus Peace, and you've heard their music today. Veterans Funeral Care and Jim Rudolph, providing services for veterans and their families. Volunteers of America, Janet Stringfellow, engaging Floridians in a need to create positive life changes through compassionate support services, and RFM Palliative Counseling Services in Switzerland with Sandra Ulrich, who is providing spiritual palliative care services for personal and professional life. West Care with Bob Neary, uplifting the human spirit through health and human services. Vanguard Veterans with Kathy Lowry Gallowitz, helping to build veteran champions in your community. And Opus Peace ambassadors who have come together to support. We also have people who wanted to make a memorial donation to honor their loved ones because they think their loved one would welcome the soul injury message into the world that they have left behind. Mary Ellen Smith is on the Opus Peace Board of Directors and is going to tell you about those contributors.
Opus Peace founder Sheila Lozier and her husband Mike provided an honorarium in the memory of their nephew Connor Fitzpatrick, who suffered a soul injury and would welcome others learning how to prevent and treat soul injury. They also honor their uncle Alan, who was a compassionate man who reached out to help hurting people. He would want to support this forum for self-compassioning. Jean Royce, the mother of Opus Peace Ambassador Tam Royce, honors Jean's husband Perry. She says that her husband always understood the ripple effect of helping others, and that it is exactly what today's Anchor Your Heart event is all about. Our final donation support comes from the Opus Peace Board of Directors. As you can probably imagine, an infant death is particularly heartbreaking, and the grief can last for decades. Recently, Deborah's 3-month-old great-grandson died unexpectedly. Although infant deaths are rare nowadays, 2 other founders and our executive director had also experienced unexpected infant deaths. And Zachariah's sudden death triggered buried grief they had experienced decades ago. The board of directors recognized the collective unmourned loss and wanted to honor all 4 infants' short lives with a donation to support this event today. An event that is designed to help all of us learn how to let pain and peace coexist together without fear. Let's just take a moment to anchor our hearts for the families of all those memorial honorees, breathing deeply, letting yourself feel whatever you are feeling. Becoming aware of the brave space inside of you that is strong enough to hold your pain without fear.
Thank you, Mary Ellen, and thank all of you for recognizing our sponsors, recognizing the unmourned grief that our core team at Opus Peace has been experiencing over the past 2 weeks. So we are going to start preparing now for our global Anchoring Heart event. And some of you may just now be joining us. So my name is Deborah Grassman. I'm one of the founders of Opus Peace, and I am here with our executive director, Angie Snyder. You know, Opus Peace has been dreaming of the day when people all over the globe could join together for 3 minutes to clear our minds of clutter, open our hearts to get real with whatever is there, and then pause to connect with our real self. This can create inner peace, and doing it together with other people magnifies that peace. You know, this kind of collective stillness is a rare and precious commodity in our rushed and busy society that seems anything but peaceful. You know, at Opus Peace, our tagline is, "Peace begins in me." Yet inner peace can seem like a daunting challenge because chaos, hostility, and other disappointments abound everywhere. And it's tempting to point the finger outward and blame others for causing it. We're not here to do that today. Instead, we are going to take 3 minutes to focus on inward peace. Focus on getting real with the pain we might feel and making peace with it. And also focusing on getting real with our own inner goodness and opening up to that part of ourselves that provides personal strength and hope. You know, there is resonance between people when they consciously join their intentions together. We've had more than 800 people register for this event today. This kind of collective resonance creates a reservoir of calm. That's what we're doing today. We're cultivating community resonance. And in doing so, personal peace is strengthened. So I want you to imagine this. Citizens around the globe, companies all over the planet, pausing at the same time for 3 minutes of silence to turn inward, take a deep breath, open their heart, and get real with whatever they discover there. Imagine people discovering the brave space inside them that unconsciously carries their emotional distress for them. And imagine the possible changes in behavior after today that could occur with individuals who start realizing that rather than using numbing agents to try to not feel what they are feeling, that they could anchor their heart and let themselves get real with what they are feeling. I'm going to lead us in a simple 3-minute grounding technique that you can use every day to stay connected with your real self. Now, this is not some gimmick that promises to magically take your anxiety away. Rather, it's a tool that helps you connect with the hero in your heart that is holding your pain and your joys for you right now. In the webinar that we just did, you saw us using that technique. And if you missed that, it's okay. I'm going to talk you through it in these next 3 minutes that we're going to do it. And afterward, we're going to give you a link for the video so that you can teach it to others. Now, before we anchor our hearts, again, I want you just to have a sense of the intention of 800 people around the globe who have registered for this event. And like you, they recognize the value of collective stillness. So take a moment to sense that collective energy before you recede within yourself. Okay, now I want you to simply lower your eyes or close them completely, whatever you prefer, and place one or both hands firmly on your heart. And firmly is important. You're not doing this just like the Pledge of Allegiance. I want you to press firmly enough that you can feel the sensation in your body and tenderly hold your heart, applying enough pressure so that you can feel the sensation. And now take 3 deep breaths. Breathing deeply. And now release the breath and breathe normally. And without changing the rhythm of your breath, I want you to notice the pause between breaths, the space after the exhalation and before the next inhalation. Noticing the stillness between breaths, knowing that that stillness is always available to you. Now just release your attention from the breath and focus now on getting real with yourself. To sincerely feel whatever you are feeling or trying not to feel. Just notice what's going on in your heart, not in your head. Giving permission for your heart to open to whatever it is feeling. Not what it's supposed to feel, but what it's really feeling. Becoming fully present to yourself. And now let yourself become still. Linger for a moment in this brave place inside you that is not afraid of your emotional pain and is not afraid of your goodness and beauty. Let yourself become curious about connecting with your human beingness. This is where your real self dwells. And lastly, before we leave this space, be again aware of the energy of all the people gathered with us at this event. And take 3 deep breaths, letting yourself resonate with this reservoir of quietude among us. Breathing that energy into yourself. Community energy. And as you prepare to move on with your day, slowly open your eyes if you close them, and bring with you this sense of how to let pain and peace sit side by side together without fear. And consider embracing joy and beauty wherever you find it, especially when you find it within yourself. Thank you. So Angie is going to tell you a few practical things before we depart from each other.
So you'll want to use the anchoring heart periodically throughout the day to simply check in with yourself, keeping it real. This isn't a magic bullet, but practice will increase its effectiveness. The hard part is simply remembering to do it when you get anxious, hurt, or overwhelmed. I encourage you to persist so that you can bring more you into your life. Now, we will take a few minutes for questions if we have any. Ginger?
Yes, we had 2 actually that I think would be worth sharing with the group. Number 1, we had someone ask, will chaplains be able to get continuing education?
So there are there's CEs for if they're a counselor per se. Yes, absolutely.
If not, we can provide a certificate of completion for anyone that needs it.
Great. Okay. The other question, well, there was a comment, and one person, when we got to the point where the iceberg was on the screen, they love the iceberg. So I want to make sure that you hear they enjoyed that feedback, or that you hear that feedback. And the other question was, of course, will the slides be available?
They will not be available, but the recording will be available. And I'll be sending out an email in the next few days that will have links to all of the resources that we discussed today that we will be giving you. The video on the Anchor Your Heart tool will be included in that, and the discussion guide and the recording of today's webinar. Were there any other questions, Ginger?
Nope, those were the only questions. Lots of wonderful comments, and folks from all across the country and around the world commented on where they're from. That's it.
Thank you, Ginger. So I started out today talking about the Go Red for Women movement and its similarities to Opus Peace and the soul injury movement. Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." So I encourage you to spread the word, be part of the soul injury movement, and join me in making sure that February 2nd becomes known worldwide as National Anchor Your Heart Day, a chance to pause and take time for you, an act of self-compassion. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you next year on February 2nd. And we want you to bring your friends, family, and colleagues with you. Have a great afternoon.